More revelations about Jeffrey Epstein may be on the way soon after a federal judge ruled this week that secret grand jury transcripts from the 2019 sex trafficking case can be made public.
The judge reversed his earlier decision to keep the material privileged. At the time, he had called the approximately 70 pages of grand jury materials a, quote, merely hearsay snippet of Epstein's conduct. But he's now changed his tune Wednesday, citing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed last month, that requires the government to disclose its files on Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
And this isn't the first judge to cite that new law in recent decisions. Just a day prior, a different federal judge ordered the release of records from Maxwell's 2021 sex trafficking case. And last week, a third judge in Florida unsealed the transcripts from an abandoned federal grand jury investigation into Epstein back in the 2000s. In response, Democratic lawmakers are celebrating the speed with which the new law is being implemented. Congressman Ro Khanna of California, writing on X, "American democracy is working. A third judge just ordered the release of files because of Representative Massey and my Epstein Files Transparency Act." And Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin went on MS Now last night to say this.
These judges are very strictly implementing the legislative intent behind the statute. The truth is going to come out now under this law, and there is a tremendous momentum behind the disclosure, not just of the grand jury records, but of all of the discovery materials. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents that are going to be released.
Meantime, the DOJ has yet to release the majority of the files under their purview. The deadline for that to happen is coming up on December 19th. According to CBS, several of Epstein's survivors have teamed up with a group of congressional Democrats to ask the DOJ's Inspector General for an independent review of those case files to determine if they have been tampered with or concealed in any way. The judges are doing what this new law instructs them to do, and that's a good thing. Congress voted to give us more information because people are understandably not satisfied with the Epstein matter so far, with the promises that FBI leadership made about disclosure that kind of got retracted when they got into office. How Pam Bondi has handled this was not good. So, I'm glad that they're releasing more things. The judge is not wrong to warn of this being unusual because it is hearsay. It is an investigative file can have misinformation in it. That's something Michael Tracy warned about when I had him on Rising. That's something the New York Times has warned about. But people clearly need more access to information. That's clear desire of both Democrats and a substantial portion of the MAGA base. So, good.
Yeah, I think that's
good.
I think that's right. I think that it'll be interesting to see whether all of the material in government files generally is released, because of course this covers grand jury proceedings, and some of those grand jury proceedings are fairly abbreviated. There's one of these cases where, according to reports, it was simply an FBI agent kind of walked into the grand jury and said, we've got this, and this, and sought an indictment. So obviously there is an enormous public appetite, understandably, for material about Epstein. We've talked, of course, a number of times about the matter, but it is so shady in so many different ways that this predator, who was very well connected to very rich and very powerful people of both parties, was able to get off so lightly for what seems heinous conduct. Obviously, people are curious about that. I'm glad, actually, that curiosity has been now fairly across the board, I would say. Obviously, Trump's perceived reticence about releasing the material caused him some problem with Republican voters. He was going to lose the vote in Congress in terms of the discharge petition, which was Massey and Khanna's thing. And so rather than suffer that defeat, he was like, I support it. A very late change of view. But absolutely, it's good that the stuff is going to be disclosed.
Do you worry a little bit about almost like Epstein information overload? Like they keep talking about thousands more pages coming, thousands more files coming. Some of this information is just is duplicative, will be similar to what we already know. Lots of information already released. I worry about, I don't know, creating the impression that there's more and more, there's so much. how can we even process this? I mean, you're going to have to rely on reporters, media figures, people who paid close attention to what this means, to then process, even for us, process it so we can process it for viewers. And people are so understandably rocked by the Epstein scandal and so distrustful of sources of authority. I feel like every time people are told we haven't actually learned all that much more, they say, well, now you're in on it too. You're also holding it back.
I think it is true that anything where there's a big public cloud of suspicion ends up in a situation where people are never satisfied. I mean, that goes back to at least the JFK assassination, where
very similar to that. It's becoming very similar to that.
Files keep coming out, and
still we get disclosure of new files that doesn't really tell us anything beyond what what most people know and have accepted is the truth, but a significant proportion of the population still doesn't because it's weird.
Well, that's true, but it is also true, I think, that in cases like this, broadly speaking, more information is better than less information.
Clearly.
And it's better to have the stuff out there. There are caveats in terms of protecting the identity of victims. Something that I think does have a downside is the guilt being imputed if people simply knew Jeffrey Epstein. Now, if people were in close contact with him, of course they should answer questions and they should be asked to clarify what the nature of that relationship was.
Depends on when they were close with him.
Right.
For me, broad forgiveness if it's way back when.
Before he was convicted.
After that he is charged and incarcerated for sex crimes, and then you're still having contact, as was the case with Bill Gates, Stacey Plaskett, Larry Summers, Steve Bannon, and on and on.
And on and on, and also the big problem for, he's now the former Prince Andrew, I can't remember what his non-title is now.
Just Andrew, just Andy.
Exactly, Andrew Windsor.
Yeah.
The issue with him was if I'm recalling this correctly, stayed in Epstein's house after the first case and was asked to explain that in pretty famous BBC interview and proved completely unable to do so. So those kind of things, I think, are very valid questions. It's just, will people be named and guilt be imputed upon them without actually any nefarious conduct?
Yeah, and will people, be satisfied when we're able to go through this information? And I think people need new names of participants in the abuse of underage women, and short of that, but then it's like we gotta give the mob something is not a tendency I necessarily love.
Yeah, I mean, but there has been very good reporting done on this. I mean, over on Drop Site News, for example, they've done quite a lot of reporting on Israeli connections with Epstein and former senior figures in Israeli politics. Things like that, on one hand, can feed conspiracy theories, but on the other hand, it's better to know it than not.
You know who's a big fan of that reporting? Benjamin Netanyahu, because he perceived that it was his opposition in Israel was much more complicit in the Epstein stuff. I believe he retweeted Ryan Grimm on this subject.
First time ever myself and Benjamin Netanyahu have been on the same page.
But next up, Kamala Harris disagrees with Michelle Obama on the subject of America having a female president. We'll tell you more. Don't go anywhere.